Welcome to Science for Hire with your host, Dr. Charles Handler. Science for Hire provides 30 minutes of enlightenment on best practices and news from the front lines of the employment testing universe.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Science for Hire. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and I have a great guest today, as I always do, but what I really love is having a guest that I don't know. I have a lot of people on that I know, and my travels in LinkedIn, one of the things LinkedIn is great for is finding interesting people who are doing interesting stuff and saying, hey, I like what you're doing. Let's talk and share that with my audience. And the other thing I love, so it's kind of a double punch here, is people that aren't really in the realm of what I do, but are the bigger picture, basically, of how people get hired, right? And that's recruitment. So my guest today, Martyn Redstone of pplbots, and I will let Martyn introduce himself and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do, and then we'll have a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, and thank you so much for inviting me on to the podcast. Really excited to be here and have this conversation with you. For those that don't know me out there, my name's Martyn Redstone. I've been in the world of technology for 25 years or so now, and I've been in the world of recruitment for 18 of those years. For the last 12 years, I've been specifically focused on technology solutions within the recruitment process, but for the last 6.5 or so years, I have been quite laser focused on conversational AI for recruitment. So that's kind of chatbots, voice bots, automated messaging, WhatsApp, those kind of things. And over the last 12 months, obviously with all the excitement around generative AI, I've pivoted a little bit towards that as well. So ultimately, as you said, pplbots is my consultancy, and I work with recruiters to upskill them on generative AI, but also to help them implement conversational AI solutions.
Very cool. So one of the thoughts I had the other day as I was thinking about chatbots, and if you remember chatbots even 2019, 2018 as kind of a candidate experience thing, boy, were those chatbots stupid. I would go and test them out, and, you're applying for this job, and if you didn't fit an exact script they had, they can't do anything but refer you to somebody else, which I thought might be even a more frustrating candidate experience than, not having a chatbot, for goodness sake. But it's changed now because chatbots are pretty smart. We still got to teach them, but they're pretty smart. So I would love to just kind of hear your take. Again, anything we do sits within the context of hiring, and recruitment really has, the tip of the spear all the way to the end of the, A to Z, as you would say there. So tell us a little bit about kind of how things have evolved before generative AI. What was the prescription? What were you doing? And then how has that changed,
Yeah, it's a great question. So I agree with you. I think 6-7 years ago, the world of chatbots and recruitment was just getting started, and we saw some early examples of people using Facebook Messenger, and 2015, 2016 was the time when Mark Zuckerberg went kind of all big on chatbots and messenger bots. So everyone was kind of jumping on that bandwagon. The challenge we've always had, whether it be the kind of simplistic chatbots of the past or even the chatbots nowadays, is more of a design problem than anything else, because the technology has always been capable of delivering a good experience. The challenge we've always had, especially in recruitment, is we don't think about the design of those experiences. That's one of the changes that I've been furiously trying to bring about for the last 6 or so years. But absolutely, now, as we kind of move through the last 6 years, we've seen people going from kind of very simple binary decision tree based chatbots all the way through to chatbots that are powered with a conversational AI stack like natural language understanding and processing and generation. And absolutely now we're seeing the move to generative AI based chatbots. Now, I don't think that a lot of the time that's necessary for what we do in recruitment. I don't think it's necessary in general across most chatbots. I think that we're seeing now some of the pitfalls of relying too heavily on large language models to power your chatbot when you're not giving it, again, design guidelines, guardrail guidelines, securing against prompt injection attacks, those kind of things. So there's certainly space out there for everything. But like I said, it always comes down to having a design first mentality.
Yeah. So tell us about that. I wrote in my notes, like, what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean what color the chatbot is or what little icon you use that's a robot that's supposed to be silly and friendly, right? What is design of a chatbot? What's that all about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Ultimately, it comes back to the design of, yeah, absolutely the experience in terms of, is it in the right branding? Do we have the right colors? All those kind of things. But absolutely what you're having is a conversation. So in much the same way that you would expect somebody who is phoning somebody on behalf of your organization or somebody in customer service in your organization, you have an expectation of the way that they handle that conversation. You should have exactly the same thought process around how a chatbot handles that conversation. So we're not just talking about, do I use emojis? Do I say hi instead of hello? Those kind of things. We're also talking about some deeper design principles to help people have a good experience. So it starts with simple things like tell the user what they can do with you. What kind of questions can they ask you? Because otherwise, like you said, you'll go on, you'll ask it something, it'll just say, I don't know, try a different way, etc. And it just becomes very frustrating. So the chatbot needs to help the user to help it deliver a good experience. And ultimately say, hey, welcome to my recruitment chatbot. You can ask me about our current openings. You can ask me about what it's like to work at the company. You can ask me questions about X, Y, and Z. And so it sets up expectations. So it's just simple little design principles that need to be implemented, and there's a whole plethora of design principles within UX design that club together to be called conversation design, and that's really, really important. So when you're implementing a chatbot, you don't just want to think about what data am I trying to collect, what colors are the buttons. You need to also think about the fact that this thing is having a conversation, and you need to design what that conversational experience is like.
Right. So there's more planning that goes into it. Who does that type of design? Is that, part recruiter, part tech person? I mean, and even what are you using? Are there like applications with a UI where you can just go in and set your chatbot up, I would imagine, without having to do a lot of deep development? So tell us a little bit about on the back end, how are you doing what you said, designing this thing, right?
Yeah. So yes, ultimately you can get bot in the box applications where it's a very simplistic no code kind of environment to set up a chatbot, but from the design side of things, absolutely needs somebody who is a conversation designer involved. It can't just be a recruiter. Some of the vendors have those people, so some recruitment chatbot vendors have conversation designers in-house, some don't. Some people use somebody like myself to come in and do that kind of design piece. So there's lots of options there. A recruiter has to be involved because they know the kind of conversation that has to happen, but they shouldn't be the person that actually goes and designs it. They need to be the consultant on the project, basically. And so we run various workshops to design those conversations. We used to do something called Wizard of Oz design testing, which is where you have two people sitting back to back actually having a conversation with each other and recording that and going through kind of exactly what that sounds like. So there's loads of cool things that you can do to make sure it's a good conversation, but it's important to have the right people involved.
Yeah, cool. So I don't know if I'm just thinking out loud here. My brain works in strange ways. Do you have any chatbot bloopers to share, like any kind of hilarious scenarios that happened because of the nature of these things and how they were trying to interact with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some great examples of chatbot conversations that don't go the way that you want them to. We obviously have to think about protecting against profanity and those kind of things. And a lot of chatbots used to have, a built-in profanity filter, so somebody would curse and swear at the chatbot, and it would just filter it out. And
right.
We have place names in the UK that look like they have got profanity within them, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was quite difficult, especially when you're bringing in something that may be American technology into use in the UK, and all of a sudden you're realizing that when you're saying, what's your address, where do you live, where are you looking for jobs, those kind of conversations, and they were being blocked from talking about where they live. So that's always an interesting situation. It doesn't really happen anymore because we get around that by not having profanity filters on, but working in a conversational way rather than just a brute force filter. But then we've seen recently in the media lots of kind of bloopers around DPD, a delivery company over here in Europe. They launched a chatbot again. They just went all in on generative AI, launched a large language model based chatbot, and somebody was able to go on, give an instruction to the chatbot, which was, swear at, you made the chatbot swear at them, asked the chatbot to write a poem talking about how terrible the company actually was.
Oh my
So
God.
that was that was
Yeah.
a terrible blooper that happened a few weeks ago. And then a couple of months ago, there was an example of a Chevy dealership over in the US.
Yeah, I
who
saw
again
that.
launched,
Oh yeah, that's everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
and somebody was able to basically buy a car for $1.
Yeah.
It's making sure you're using the right technology and making sure you're using it the right way. So whilst they're funny bloopers, there's a lot of learning that you can take out of them. And I think that's the most important part, is rather than holding these people up and saying, look how terrible chatbots are, actually think, why did it go wrong? What can we do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Right. Well, I mean, that's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes, and
Absolutely.
you can't also, you could try to think through every scenario that'll happen, and you can't until you actually put it in the wild. So I have it's not exactly a chatbot story, but it's a chat story, and I wonder if this happens too on your end. So I work a lot of times work in contact centers and build assessments and stuff. So we were and we sit with people in those centers and watch what they do so we can understand the job and what human skills they need. So we were working with chat tech support agents, and we had I was spending time interviewing them, and all of them said that this is for phone service tech support, cellular service tech support, but they have people who just come on because they're lonely and they want to talk to somebody, so they'll just go in the chat and strike up a conversation. They have people that come on there and try to get them to go on a date, whatever. But I thought that was really interesting. Oh wow, people are, and now that you have the GPT store, you see about there's 25,000 GPT girlfriends people are creating, right? So maybe you don't need to call your cellular provider anymore to have a conversation. But anyway, I don't know how much that happens, or if you even know. Like, do you collect dialogues, transcripts of all the different chats and analyze that to see trends and things? Is that part of what goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'll talk about kind of two different things around what you were just talking about. But yes, absolutely. One of the things that we always need to do is review the performance of the chatbot and this is why I keep saying to people, you have to think of a chatbot like they are a member of staff. You can't just
Right.
let them go and get on with it. You need to periodically review how their performance is. And so
Yeah.
and so when a chatbot, that is looking at transcripts, finding trends. Why aren't people completing the conversation? Where are they getting frustrated? Where are they asking for a human? All those kind of things where we can see the negative aspect. And the lovely thing about a chatbot is you can retrain it in how to deal with that situation. So if it's not dealt with the situation very well, or it's trying to handle something it's not even trained for, you can then train it for that situation or retrain it, and it will remember it forever, unlike a human who might forget it next week. So it's so yeah, absolutely, that's a big part of managing a chatbot. And I stole a phrase off of a friend in the industry a while ago, but when I implement chatbots into businesses, we always make sure that there's at least one bot master in that organization who is doing that role as part of their management of the chatbot, is reviewing the performance of the chatbot.
Gotcha.
But actually, the going back to the point about chatbot girlfriends and chatbot boyfriends and what have you, it's there are chatbots out there that are designed specifically for that, as you've seen within GPT store, but also kind of commercially, there are lots of apps out there for that. We do hear stories about people trying to be inappropriate with chatbots to see how it will react. You also hear interesting stories. So there's maybe not a chatbot per se, but there used to be an email-based scheduling tool. So it would use natural language processing to have a back and forth conversation via email, and it would take on the persona of a personal assistant for the person who's trying to organise the meeting. And so it was that impressive, the technology, that people used to actually send flowers to the offices
No
for
way.
who they thought
Seriously?
was a person, but they were sending it for a chatbot. Yeah, absolutely. So there's some really famous stories around that. But actually, very interestingly, there's one of the biggest use cases for conversational technology now is for companionship.
Yeah.
And so we know that, I think there was a survey done recently where 14% of respondents said they absolutely expect to have some kind of companion-based relationship with a conversational interface in the future.
Interesting.
But there are businesses out there like Intuition Robotics and Furhat Robotics. Furhat is Scandinavia, and Intuition Robotics, an Israeli company, who are providing companionship robots, which are conversational based, to old people who are suffering from loneliness. So, no, Intuition Robotics, it's really cool. And Intuition Robotics, great company. They built fantastic bot, as it were. It's kind of like an iPad style device that can move around and what have you. And they put it into old people's homes, especially in places like New York and what have you. A lot of old people get given them by the state.
Yeah.
And they not only do they have conversations from a companionship perspective, but they'll remind them to take their medication. They'll also, based on their multimodal display, they'll be able to take them through things like stretching exercises, yoga exercises to keep their mobility out. So there's absolutely this fantastic companionship based use case, but it has to be done appropriately and sensibly, rather than just somebody trying to chat up a chatbot on a cellular phone helpline.
Right. Well, we know that some point it's going to make the jump to some physical vessels that aren't just like a Roomba with an arm on it. They're going to be even synthetic, flesh or whatever. I think that across the board of any kind of companionship, even inappropriate kinds, I think you're gonna see a pretty big industry there. And I mean, you see robots. I read in my news feed that Elon Musk is making an army of, robots. There's other companies. We'll see. There's so much hype going on, but it's inevitable, right, that it happens. And geez, you start playing it forward in your mind, and it gets really crazy to the point of like, whoa, look at Blade Runner or something like that. Like we could end up with all that stuff. So I try to at least focus down a little bit. So right now, you're advising a company, they want to use a recruitment chatbot. They've never tried that. Maybe they do want to use generative AI, because I think also it's an interesting point you made earlier. I think in my travels, I see people just wanting to throw AI at anything and not realizing that it's not a solution by itself. It's find your problem first and figure out if it's a good prescription. There's what I call AI FOMO, right? People are just like, we can't not use this because everybody is, and it's taking over the world. So, and it really does require a good modicum of caution. I think at the big corporate enterprise people I talk to about how they're using AI, everybody's still kind of in at least generative is still in okay, well, let's kind of wait and see. Let's tinker with it, which is a good thing, I think. It just evolves so fast that you could be tinkering forever. Tell us, you're a consultant to, I'm sure, a lot of folks, and they want to leverage this thing for recruitment. What's your process you go through to kind of determine the use case and a good use case, and then, how you help set that up? I'm very curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of kind of standardization across the board, but actually every time I go into a new recruitment team, recruiting organization, you have to think that they have their own separate challenges. And so that's the bit where we start at, is what are we trying to solve for? Because that's the bit that drives the value. And like you said, there's no point in just having a shiny object for the sake of having a shiny object. You need to think about where the value is going to be.
All right. So if you all out there are watching the video and you notice that Martyn and I are wearing different outfits this time around, I'm not ashamed to relay that, we had a continuity issue. I worked in TV production for a while, and continuity is really a pain when you got to check every single little thing. But we had the first ever in 4 years of doing this technical crash. So I don't think it was Martyn's fault. It happened right when the train whistle blew. So we're going to pick back up where we left off, and hopefully, I know for sure the stimulating and awesome conversation will continue. We're just wearing different clothes, but we're both ready to go. My outfit was in the wash. I didn't really check what I was wearing, but that's okay. So I asked you the question, which is a really important question, and I'm super excited to hear about it because I don't have any experience really with what you do. But when you go into a client to help them out, obviously they're contacting you for different reasons, but walk me through your process of how you get from the initial meeting to actually producing something for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, and apologies for the continuity. I think it's warmer today. I think I might have been wearing a hoodie last time or something. So it's definitely a bit warmer today, which is great because it was winter was getting to me a little bit. Yeah, so it's a great question. What happens when we come into a client? Well, the thing is that there's no one standard reason that a client calls me, and it could be they want to explore the possibilities, it could be that they're trying to fix something. Ultimately, where we start is by evaluating the current situation. So once we're happy to move forward with the project, as in, we're mutually happy to move forward with the project, the first thing that I do with all of my clients is run a workshop. And I run something that I've been building up over time. I call it a lightning innovation workshop, because some of these things can take days upon days upon days. I try and get it done in one day. Usually 2-3 hour sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, with the senior leadership or anybody that's impacted by what we're trying to do. And so the first session is, let's find out just what is actually wrong, and what you're trying to fix. Find out, where the issues are, where the challenges are, where the bottlenecks are, those kind of things in the process. And then the afternoon is solutionized for them. Come up with some ideas, come up with some experiments, because we always like a bit of an experiment, and a bit of a proof of concept situation. Then we plan towards the solution for that in the afternoon as well. So once we're happy that we've got, here's the problem we're trying to solve and here's the potential solution for it, it's then about building the plan around what that solution looks like, how it's going to be implemented, what do we need, those kind of things. So then we go into the real standard project management piece. The interesting thing about running different types of projects that are kind of in that sphere of AI is that there's lots of different ways that people interact with technology. As you know, one of my kind of specialist areas is conversational AI. So running a conversational project is a little bit different to running a new website project or an app project or something like that. So although it should still absolutely be treated as the same kind of complexity, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I tend to come in on, is people tend to think that something like a chatbot is a simpler project than a new website, let's say.
Right.
So it's about grounding them and making sure they understand the complexities around that project as well. That's super important to manage expectations from the beginning.
Yeah, of course. So, what are some of the more interesting, and definitely let's stay in the realm of the chat bot and conversational stuff, just because that's a unique specialty that I don't think a lot of people know about. So I'm excited to hear. But what are some of the more common, or maybe just pick one that's one of your favorite projects, implementations? What did you accomplish, kind of thing?
Yeah, oh goodness me, there's been so many. There seems to be quite a standard type of use case that people want to implement chatbots for within the recruitment space. And ultimately, that is when you've got a high volume of applicants and you want to whittle that down to a long list ultimately. So that seems to be a very, very common use case. Again, there's lots of dependencies around their current tech stack, whether as an organization they're using cloud services from Amazon, Google, and what have you, because a lot of the time, especially over here in Europe, there's a lot of data security process that we have to go through before we can even think about kicking off. So like to stick with what they've already got, and so kind of make it easier to get the tech in there. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples of that, and ultimately, again, we can do some really simple stuff around, is it a very binary role? Do we just need yes, no's? Is it manufacturing? Are you able to stand up in a factory for 12 hours? Can you lift 25 kilos? Those kind of things. Or is a little bit deeper than that, and so we've implemented solutions that will score the candidate based on their linguistic response, their text response, asking them for situational questions. Tell me about a time when you've delivered exceptional customer service, looking at how they respond, analysing that, being able to pull out things like big 5 personality traits from those kind of answers, and really just scoring it around there. So there's some really cool things we can do. Really cool things, and from there you can you can take that away. You can score it against the requirements for the role, but you can also score it against the other candidates as well and give people relative long lists based not only on how they match to the role, but also how they compare against the other applicants as well. So that's kind of the main use case. One of my favorite use cases is always regenerating applicants on an ATS, and I think that's really important. People don't think about that. You know, you spent years as a recruiter and as a business spending so much money on recruitment advertising, and so you fill up your recruitment system with so many different people that are interested in working for you as an organization, and you repeat that process over and over and over again. So one of the great use cases that we go into businesses with is actually let's use messaging and conversational AI to go back out to people over WhatsApp, over SMS, what have you, and actually ask them whether they're still interested in working there, update their profiles, get a really good picture of what that applicant pool looks like within your system, and then fish from that pool rather than spending more money going back out and advertising on job boards and what have you. Actually start finding people that you've already got in your database that you're probably bringing back in time and time again.
Yeah, that's really smart. And, you know, before these kind of tools, you know, I've had a lot of exposure to people talking about how do we do that? You know, maybe that's through email or whatever, but it's definitely more immediate, right? To be able to message people out. Well, I should give away some kind of a prize or something. I don't know, because you totally read my mind. I mean, I have my little list here and my next question was, hey, what about screening, right? Because again, my interaction with chatbots just to fool around, it's been a while, and you know, I tried some screening ones and they're pretty crude, right? But what you were mentioning is pretty, you know, that's the realm of my training and expertise is, you know, how do we sift and sort people based on really good, reliable, accurate, you know, data collection relative to what the job requires. And you know, I was a little surprised to hear you talk about some of those more in-depth methods. And I think that here in the US, you know, we have a lot of regulations, and I think that, you know, if you're not an applicant yet, it's a little bit of a gray area, right? If you're not an applicant yet, those rules don't apply to you. But if you are carrying that score over across when someone's an applicant, then it can become an issue just because there's a little bit of, you know, inconsistency. Maybe some people came through a different channel. I don't know, but it becomes more in the crosshairs of what regulation is once you're a candidate. So I'm assuming, maybe it's a wrong assumption, that, you know, most interaction with a chatbot is going to be by someone who's not an applicant yet in order to them be engaged and to move forward in the process to compel them if they are indeed a good fit. So tell me a little bit more about, you know, how you go about, well, who's taking those things at what stage, and how you go about actually, you know, constructing those kind of tools.
Yeah, so you've raised some fair points. So the first kind of top of the funnel use case for a chatbot is definitely the search and apply piece. So the search could be, let's find a job, but it could also be, let's answer all the questions you have about this job as well. And ultimately, you know, people want to know, you know, is it, you know, nowadays especially, is it remote? Is it in the office? Is it hybrid?
Right.
Oh, it's in the office. Can I bring my dog in? You know, do you pay for travel? You know, all those kind of things. And so there's the opportunity to give people a really good opportunity to make a sensible decision as to whether or not they want to apply for the job based on being able to ask those questions. So you're actually helping people screen themselves in or out right at the top level.
Perfect.
And that's super important because nowadays, you know, in the world of one-click applies and what have you, it becomes quite a burden, not only on the recruiter to deal with that volume, but also on the candidate to apply for tons of roles, but also to keep on top of all the roles they've applied for. So help them screen themselves in or out based on their knowledge of the role. Once they've applied, and they can do that either old-fashioned way by a form, or they can do that conversationally on a chatbot. But once they've applied, that's the biggest thing that we have to try and fix in recruitment is that blank space between applying and then hearing back, if ever at all, from the organization.
The black hole.
And the best way that you can do the black hole, absolutely, this ghosting area that people kind of really get frustrated about. So the best way possible is to respond to them, and ask them to take part in a screening conversation. And that screening conversation is a bit deeper. It could be, are you in the right location? Are you looking for the right kind of salary? Those kind of really top level, kind of screening questions. But like I said, you can go really deeper into it and start asking people to go through situational questions. And there's definitely ways that we can build that. So, the situational questions, like I said, tell me about a time when you've delivered fantastic customer experience. Tell me about a time when you dealt with, a team or, whatever, And so what we can do from there is we can infer personality traits, start scoring those responses, basically.
Via NLP, is that?
Is using NLP.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're using natural language processing to strip it apart and decipher and the context of the answer. There's various different technical ways of doing that, whether you build it from scratch or whether you use a back end. There's some great platforms out there. There's one called Juji, which has done a lot of research, published research on inferring personality through chat.
Who was that again? I'm going to write that down.
Juji, Juji.
Okay.
That's a fantastic chatbot platform. But there's also other chatbot platforms that are built specifically for hiring. So there's Sapia, SAPIA. They're an Australian business.
I know them. I know them.
Not only do they, give the candidate the opportunity to go through this and score them, but they also deliver a report back to the candidate.
Yeah. Awesome.
Telling them all about themselves and what have you. And it's fantastic, and it's those kind of experiences that are delightful for a candidate, because not only are they not being ignored, they're being engaged by a representative of the organization, whether that's a digital representative or not. They're being engaged by a representative of the organization. They're getting in touch with them. They're having a conversation. They're understanding that this is the first part of the assessment towards whether or not you're a right fit for the role. And so it's super important to make sure that there's some kind of engagement there, because people don't get responded to.
So is that automated? So, you talk about, okay, they're going to have a conversation. Would it happen to me that I go onto a employer site, I interact with the chatbot, I determine that there is, or we together determine that there is a role that I would like to apply for, that I'm probably suitable for. Am I instantly taken into the assessment type stuff you're talking about, or is there a wait while a recruiter kind of reviews it and then sends me some kind of a message to say, hey, this is the next step?
Well, ultimately, you can do that for everyone that applies, because you won't have time as a recruiter to take a quick look at the applications and invite them to a conversation. And, ultimately, a chatbot can have a conversation with tens of hundreds of thousands of people all at the same time. And the cost of doing that is pretty negligible. Yeah, so I would just suggest do it for everybody, because you never know when you might find a bit of a gold nugget in your applicants.
Yeah.
And you weed them out that way. So I would suggest doing that for everyone. Look, the Pangea of conversational interaction would be, if you find the best candidate through the automated chat, be able to hand them over to a live chat with the recruiter immediately. And that takes us into the realm of kind of conversational marketing and those kind of things. But I don't think most recruiters would be interested in that, because they don't like to be interrupted in their flow and those kind of things. But that would be the fantastic thing. Oh, look, I found the best candidate ever for this role. I'm going to hand you over to the recruiter. The recruiter can take you forward from there. That would be incredible. But most recruiters aren't interested in that kind of experience. And I understand why.
Well, it's interesting, too. What you're kind of on the tip of the spear with recruitment marketing, too, right? Because you're such an experiential component, an informational component, probably more so than a lot of people in... well, I guess it depends on the application, but, for me, I work a little bit further down the funnel a lot, where you're already now a good experience of representing your brand critical throughout the whole process, right? So recruitment is sales and marketing, really, with a lot of good analytics and, ability to make some inferences, hopefully good, accurate inferences. So do you work in the US at all? You have clients in the US, or just mostly in the EU?
I have done in the past. It's not my main kind of clientele tend to be UK and Europe.
Right.
But I've done work across the US and the Middle
Gotcha.
East as well.
Very cool. So I'm starting a project right now. I'm just doing the research, but I had an idea, which I won't give away here, but starting a project that involves Gen AI, training Gen AI to do something. And on the front end, I want to have a chatbot, right? So that someone can interact with it and say, I want to do this. And it comes back and says, okay, what about this, this, and this? So how, you know, I know nothing about this yet, and you're part of my research here. What do you do to create? So I'm assuming there's a platform or application that you access to stitch the two pieces together.
Yeah, it depends what you want to do ultimately. But yeah, I mean, the it the whole point of an application like that would be using the chatbot to create the data that you push into the large language model to get some kind of output back out of it.
Right.
I would have thought. So you can do that with a lot of different chatbot platforms. It just depends whether you want that chatbot platform being powered by something that involves a large language model, or something that involves natural language understanding, or just something that's a very straightforward decision tree.
Right. Right.
Most of these platforms run on APIs, and therefore you can push data in and out as and when you want to. The one thing that I would always say to people as they're going through a project that involves both chatbots and large language models is, we've seen a lot of use cases now where people are trying to run their chatbots using Gen AI, and it doesn't work because they haven't thought about the hallucinations, the prompt injections, all those kind of things. So I would always suggest not relying on large language models and generative AI to power your chatbot. I would absolutely be relying on those kind of technologies to fill in the gaps. So let's say, for instance, when you're building a chatbot, if you're using kind of, the standard conversational AI stack, so natural language understanding, natural language processing, natural language generation, and machine learning. Let's say I come onto the chatbot and I say hello. In the old days, you'd need to train the chatbot to understand all the different ways that somebody could say hello, and then explain to it how you wanted it to respond back to that. Where we can use large language models in that process is, rather than spending our time as chatbot developers training the system to understand that somebody's saying hello, is pushing that utterance into the large language model and saying, tell me what this person's trying to say, and matching it to one of our intents that we've built in. So an intent could be, this person saying hello, respond this way. So we're saying, okay, large language model, tell me what intent this person's doing, because large language models are very good at capturing data and creating structure out of it.
Yeah, they are.
So creating structure out of unstructured data. So the large language model will say, I think based on X, Y, and Z, this person is trying to say hello, enter them into the hello intent, and then the conversational takes back over and responds back with the right response. So that's kind of where we tend to try and use large language models, because it's the safest part and the most powerful part. Yeah.
Gotcha. So my situation is a very narrow use case, and I plan on, again, I'm just researching it, but I plan on taking an open source one and using like a retrieval augmented generation type thing. So it's really just looking at specific new information I've given it to try and put some boundaries, around it. And the use case is so narrow. When someone comes on, they have a purpose, and this is just to help guide them through a purpose. So, but that's really interesting. I'm pretty excited actually about, the project, but boy, as I started to understand how do you train a large language model, it's a lot of work if you really want a structured thing, right? I mean, you could feed it all kind of junk to help expand its horizons, but you also have to index, I guess, and, template everything. So it knows. Now, once it gets that in place, right, it knows what it's supposed to do, and you can pile more stuff in. So hopefully the work's more on the front end, but it's an interesting project.
Yeah, no, and I would certainly say that you're right. There if you wanted to use something powered by a large language model, there are two different ways that you can control it. You can either fine tune a large language model, which is an exceptional amount of effort, and that sometimes isn't necessary, and you can use one of the smaller open source large language models like Llama 2 or Mistral or what have you, and there's loads more continuously coming out. Or you can use, like you just said, retrieval augmentation generation, RAG, as people kind of see it written down nowadays. And there are fantastic platforms that allow you to do that. And one of the best ones out there is VoiceFlow. Funnily enough, you can actually see on the cap behind me there is the logo of VoiceFlow. They're a good friend of mine, so I'm not employed by them or get any kind of commission for them, but they're one of my favorite platforms for building RAG-powered large language model chatbots. They're probably one of the best out there for building what we call AI agents nowadays, rather than just chatbots. So I would certainly take a look at them for that kind of use case.
So I also had I wanted to ask you this.
It's become a free consultancy call rather than a podcast.
Oh my goodness, send me a bill.
I'm joking.
Well, no, this isn't a consultancy. This is more of a theoretical question. I don't know if it's a rhetorical question, but I thought it would be interesting. Like, do you think there'll ever be a time when generative AI can just create a chatbot for you, where you just say, all right, I need a chatbot that's going to do these things. Go out there and build it for me. Right? I mean, is that something that's, we're going to get agents are the new thing, right? So
entirely possible.
Yeah.
No, it's entirely possible. I mean, the thing that we have to bear in mind is that, again, it's allowing an AI agent built with a large language model to make decisions on your behalf.
Right.
And so I would
Scary.
always a very, very scary thought process. Yeah, it's not outside the realms of reality for you to be able to give an instruction to a chatbot to build a chatbot. It asks you all of the questions around what that chatbot needs to be. There's most likely technology out there that's already doing this, but I feel slightly uncomfortable with it. But yeah, there's absolutely, and then that sets off a series of agents that do different parts of the build process. And then, Bob's your uncle, you've got yourself a chatbot. I think that's totally doable. The challenge with generative AI, like I've always said, is the fact that it doesn't know zero. So it will never say, I don't know that, or I don't understand that. If it doesn't know it, it will make it up. And so that's the problem you've always got, is that if you're going to build something that builds a chatbot, you need to make sure you're asking every single question you need to know in order to build a chatbot. I mean, most people try and find shortcuts and what have you using generative AI. That's fine. But yeah, the technology's there. It could absolutely be done. Yeah.
Hey, look, we're living in a world of deep fakes, and why not have a chatbot deep fake you with fake information? I guess
have a chatbot deep fake you.
Yeah, chatbot. Exactly. Well, I mean, our agents are going to be talking to other people's agents soon enough, right? I also feel like I'm interested in your take, because I know that we're getting closer and closer to being able to generate photorealistic avatars. There's companies now that have avatar-based chatbots. They're still a little creepy looking, but that's going to get better and better. So do you anticipate the little chat the little chat bubble symbol eventually being replaced with a human in a snappy uniform for the company you're applying to? Like, what's the take on the personification and movement from a little bubble to an actual person for this?
It's a really, really interesting subject, and there's so much research out there around whether you even need to genderize a chatbot, let alone create a human-based avatar. Ultimately, we're exceptionally intelligent beings. People don't realize just how intelligent we are. And we have a part of our brain that recognizes a face. And recognizes whether that face is real or not. So, and that's why whenever we see, a digitally created avatar, we immediately know that it's not real. And so the technology's got a long way to go before it can trick us into thinking it's real. We have things like the uncanny valley where things look like a person and what have you, but when it comes to actually making people think that they're dealing with a real person, it's a very long way off. However, there's certainly research out there that says that if you present a human-based interaction with a human-looking avatar, then you get better engagement. I think that certainly. So you have to remember the different types of interaction we're talking about here. We've got chat interaction, which is literally just chatting as you would chat to any person on a piece of software. You've got voice, which is the stuff that we're used to when we deal with our Alexas and Siris of the world and what have you. And then we've got multimodal. And multimodal is a mixture of all of those put together, but it's also visual as well. And that's where the avatar comes into it. And we talk about multimodal when we develop things like deal with kind of our Alexa views or whatever they're called, and our Nest hubs where we've got, show me a recipe and it will show the recipe as well as talk you through it. So that's multimodal as well. But multimodal conversational interaction with an avatar is absolutely there. We've got lots of companies doing it, Synthesia, and lots of other businesses out there. And it's great. It's absolutely brilliant. But there's no point in trying to dupe people into thinking they're dealing with a real person. So do I see an avatar happening on the website? There's some great companies out there that build 3D holograms of actual people. To number and MEE. And they do that from a kind of marketing perspective, in an influencer perspective. But again, it's a bit of fun. It doesn't really make a huge difference on the engagement side of things. Not for the use cases that I work with anyway.
Yeah, I feel like it could actually cause more problems if, the gender or the ethnicity of the chatbot's different than me. What does that mean? Or, it is creepy looking, which is a turn off for me. Do you have clients though that kind of insist, like we really want to try, having some kind of a persona attached to this thing? What do you typically advise them? Sometimes clients have something stuck in their head and they think it's what they have to do, and sometimes it's hard to convince them otherwise. But I'm just curious.
Part of what we do is and when you build a chatbot properly, you should absolutely give that chatbot a persona. But like I said, you don't need to genderize it. You can do. Lots of companies do. They say that the persona of this chatbot is very similar to our consumer persona that we focus on. It's a 27-year-old female from California, and who cusses a little bit but uses emojis. Those kind of things that will give stick back when they get it. All those kind of things. But it's very important to build that persona, but get it right. And you can do that a bit easier when it comes to chat, because you don't need to think about, like you said, about genderizing, about ethnicity, all those kind of things. So for instance, I always talk about MGM resorts over in the US.
One of my clients, ex-clients, one
of your clients, they've got a chatbot on their career site, and I would take advantage of putting a bit of personality into that chatbot, because there's no personality in there. And so I would say I would go back to basics and I say, what's MGM famous for? The line at the beginning of the films. Let's put that line in as the persona, because it doesn't have to be the persona that you're talking to, because when it comes to recruitment, you could be talking to so many different people, but it could be the brand persona. Leo the Lion, whatever the lion's name was called. I know it was a well-known kind of story. Exactly. So it's those kind of things that people need to think about as well, is that it doesn't have to be the persona of who you're trying to sell to or who you're trying to attract. It can also be a brand persona. And so really important part of a chatbot project is building what that persona is.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. Well, we're coming up on kind of the wind down time. I think if you had to leave our audience with one thing to think about, let's say, hey, we really do want to create a warmer, fuzzier piece of our process, and let's think about deploying some of this stuff. I mean, what's your advice? What would you want to leave our listeners with around this kind of realm that we've been talking about?
I think I'll repeat what I said earlier. Don't think of it as a quick and easy project. I think a lot of people have fallen into this trap, especially with chatbots that are out there that are just kind of wrappers for ChatGPT. You need to do it properly. If you want to ensure that you're creating a responsible but fantastic experience for your candidates, it needs to be done properly. And so that's what I would leave people with. I think that it's a great idea and it's a really fun project to do, but make sure it's done properly.
So don't buy a chatbot from a dodgy guy in a dark alley who's opening up his raincoat and he's got a whole bunch of chatbots you can choose from in there. black market
Yeah.
chatbots. You never know what they're
Yeah,
going to say. I
exactly.
think it
Exactly.
was it a giant, I think it was Microsoft they created a chatbot that started, spewing hateful vitriol at people, like, I mean, you have to be careful. Maybe that was a black
Yes,
market.
you do.
Yeah.
You do, and look, this has happened plenty of times because what tends to happen, especially in the early days of language models, back in like 2017, 2018, 2019, when we started kind of working with the earlier kind of iterations of large language models, we had chatbots like Microsoft's Tay and Facebook at the time's Blender that were trained on public conversations, such as conversations on Twitter or Reddit and what have you. And unfortunately, very, very quickly, you can go into a bit of a cesspit part of those platforms and come across a lot of problematic language that's racist or sexist or just completely abusive. And that's what happened with Microsoft Tay, is that it very quickly went uber right wing and started becoming very, very racist and almost kind of, glorifying Nazism. And the same things happened with BlenderBot as well. The first iteration of it, because they were training it on unsupervised data. So that's why nowadays we see the human reinforced training that happens with large language models, where not only do we train it on open data, and just to be clear, GPT-4 from OpenAI and other kind of larger language models that we've had in the last 12 months, they'll probably be the last iteration that's trained on public data. We've run out of enough data to train the next size models. So the next size models will be trained using synthetic data that's been created by large language models. So that's the scary part. So that's why a lot of these companies now put in a human in the loop in the training. So not only do we take the data, 175 billion parameters for GPT-4 from the public, from the public corpuses, corpi, whatever the Latin is for plural of corpus, and start processing that data, start creating conversations, then asking humans to mark those, to score those and to fix them as well. So there's been a lot of bad press, of kind of, people in Africa that are being used in a large volume to do this, and they're having terrible problems with mental health and mental scarring just from the amount of abusive stuff that they've seen online. And so it's a real shame, but that's the only way that you can do this, and it's up to the organizations to make sure that if they are using humans in the loop, to make sure that they're supported and make sure they're cared for, because that's the most important.
Yeah. You're not the first guest that I've had. My friend Karen, she's all about the model training. She's an expert in that. And she was saying the same thing, like what a humanitarian problem it is. And it's bad because society is benefiting so much from these things. It really stinks to think that, part of it is on the back of non-beneficial behaviors, and it's a real note about just how fast all this stuff is moving, I think, and just how much demand there is. And that demand, I know personally, I've never felt more overwhelmed with information, right? I mean, I have attention problems anyway, but there's so much interesting stuff. It's hard to keep up. So what a fascinating conversation. Martyn Redstone, pplbots is your company, right? So you got a minute for any kind of shameless plug where people can find you, or, of course, LinkedIn. I say it every time. I should say you can find them on LinkedIn. I shouldn't even ask you the question, but you might have some other things you'd want to share. So this is your moment.
LinkedIn is always the best way to find me. I'm the only Martyn Redstone in the world, Martyn with a Y, as it says here. So LinkedIn is always the best place to find me. Through LinkedIn, you'll also find my newsletter. My newsletter is called Hair. It's a play on words. It's AI in HR, but also the fact that I don't have any hair is the ironic part of it. So yeah, so find me on LinkedIn, find my newsletter there. If you do want to go to my website, which is not as exciting as my LinkedIn profile, then you can do. It's pplbots, but it's people. It's cool kid language. It's people PPL. So it's pplbots.com, and you can find me there as well. But feel free to find me and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's always the easiest place.
I found you through that hair newsletter, which I like. It's one of the many pieces of content that I'm consuming all the time. So that's great. Thank you so much for your time, both times.
We got there in the end. I'm glad we got there in the end.
Yeah, for sharing another piece of your wardrobe.
Honestly, not
Yeah.
much changes, to be honest with you. I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
17
That
of his
makes it
t-shirts
easy.
and they work. Absolutely. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on, Charles. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. Some
Yeah.
fantastic questions. Thank you so much for giving me the
Cool.
opportunity to answer them.
As we wind down today's episode, dear listeners, I want to remind you to check out our website, rockethire.com, and learn more about our latest line of business, which is auditing and advising on AI-based hiring tools and talent assessment tools. Take a look at the site. There's a really awesome FAQs document around New York City Local Law 144 that should answer all your questions about that complex and untested piece of legislation. And guess what? There's going to be more to come, so check us out. We're here to help.